Okay, before I get into the story, there are a few things I need to explain about my country, South Africa, for you to fully understand the story. In South Africa, it's normal to have high brick walls with electric gates, electric fences, alarms, etc. And the crime here can be pretty bad. It's also pretty normal to have big gardens. My family and I are big animal lovers, so at the time, we had 6 dogs. 2 Shar-Peis, 2 German short-haired pointers, and 2 dachshunds. With that being said, our dogs roam freely in and out of the garden, as it's obviously enclosed. We usually leave the veranda door open during the day for them to do their thing. Another thing about South Africa, it's normal to have a live-in domestic worker, a maid, or a gardener. Like the average family usually employs them. It's not only for wealthy people, which seems to be a thing in other countries. For the story, our DW is Ellie, and our gardener is Vince. So, this happened in 2007 and I was 9 years old. My older brother was 10, and I had just gotten our first cell phones that day. My dad surprised us after work. You may think it's a bit young, but it was used for emergencies or to communicate with our parents. Anyways, it's an important piece of info for the story. We don't usually leave our veranda door open at night, due to security reasons, but I remember it being a hot summer night that night. So of course, this night of all nights, the veranda door was wide open, and the dogs were doing their thing in the garden. My brother and I were in my parents' room setting up our new cell phones, all excited. Nellie's daughter, Anne, who's like an older sister to us, she was 18, was helping my brother and I. My dad was somewhere in the house and my mom was in the bath. I specifically remember Anne having a comment about how the dogs would not shut up and how annoying it was. And that's when I noticed it too. Sure, they would bark, but it was usually the dachshunds that yapped when the bigger dogs just chilled. Plus, it would only happen for a few minutes and then they would get over it. But something was different that night, as even the bigger dogs were barking non-stop. My dad appeared in his room and mentioned to us that he had noticed the dogs' incessant barking, and he was going to go check if everything was okay. No alarm bells went off in my head, and I don't believe my dad thought anything was amiss either, because my brother had asked to investigate with him, and my dad agreed. I was obviously too engrossed in my new Sony Ericsson. My dad ventured out to our garden with my brother in tow, when my dad had noticed that the dogs were all grouped, growling and going nuts at the dark corner behind our in-the-ground swimming pool. The best way to describe it is our garden beyond our pool hits like a slight decline. So we have a few steps leading down the hill to the bottom end of our garden. We usually have a lamp that lights it up, but my dad had noticed how that lamp seemed to be off, which confused him because he could have sworn it worked the other night. Either way, my dad said he got his gut-wrenching feeling because of this and because of how out of character the dogs were acting. He called after them and they would usually come running, but tonight they all seemed to just look at him, and then turn back around and continue going crazy at this dark corner down the steps. My dad told my brother to go back inside of the house and get a torch, sort of using it as an excuse for my brother not to come with him because of his feeling. When my brother went back inside, my dad slowly approached the steps. He noticed how the dog seemed to be snapping at whatever it was, hiding just out of view in the darkness. As he got to the steps, he noticed that the lamp was smashed. Confused, he inched to these steps, and as he put 2 and 2 together, it was too late. My dad, being an ex-vet and avid hunter, felt something cold against his temple, and immediately knew that it was a gun. Out of the darkness stepped 4 other men in balaclavas, all armed. Shocked, he stood frozen on the steps. The man holding the gun to his head was instantly aggressive and asked him where my brother was. That he saw my dad come out with my brother, but my brother went back into the house. Why? My dad said something came over him, and before he knew what he was saying, he responded with, "He's gone inside to press the panic button." As he said that, he saw how all of these guys started to panic. And they started speaking in a different language. It's not common for people to speak it, but my dad had actually grown up on a farm where he learned it fluently because of the farm workers. The aggressive guy holding the gun said in a different language, "Crap, the cops will be here any minute. Let's just kill this guy and grab what we can and go." The others seemed apprehensive, and a smaller guy seemed really on edge, and continued to say how he can't go back to jail again, and that they needed to get the heck out before the cops showed up, which would be any minute. He was panicking. My dad then fed on this guy's fear. My dad then interrupted them, speaking English, pretending to not understand what they were saying, and said that we usually have armed response vehicles that drove in our area, and since my brother had pushed the panic button so long ago, they'd probably be here any second. And that did it. My dad watched as their plan unraveled before them, and the smaller scared guy started freaking out all of the other guys, saying that they needed to leave ASAP or else they would be caught. He seemed to make the others more nervous and lose confidence, until they started full-on bickering amongst themselves, their plan slowly turning to crap, as a third guy put it. The aggressive one, pointing the gun at my dad's head, slowly lowered it as they had started fighting, losing focus on my dad and shifting his focus onto his crew. My dad then used this as an opportunity to slowly back up the steps and turn to dart to the house. As luck would have it, as my dad ran into the veranda door, my oblivious brother was heading out with a torch. My dad scooped him up under his arm mid-ran and sprinted into the house, not even closing the door behind him. Silly, I know, but I think he just wanted to get my brother inside as quick as possible, without even thinking. Anne and I were obviously also oblivious to everything, when my dad rushed through the bedroom door, slammed it shut and told us to go upstairs into the attic, that there are 5 guys with guns outside, and they're here to hurt us. Get upstairs now. And my heart sank. I remember my body automatically responding and me sprinting to the stairs with Anne right behind me. My mom ran out of the bathroom in a towel not too far behind. We sat there in the darkness and silence. I swear that you could hear a pin drop. I think we were all just waiting to hear something below us in the rooms. My mom cursed, saying that she didn't have a phone, and neither did my dad. But in my hand was my brand new Sony Ericsson. No better emergency to use it than right now. My mom dials the police, and I kid you not, they asked where we lived. We explained and they told us that it wasn't in their jurisdiction. Sorry. Click, and the line went dead. We're now not only crapping ourselves, but we're flabbergasted too. My mom starts cursing like a sailor again, and that's when my dad realizes, dang, he didn't close the veranda door. And what about Ellie and Vince, who are in their rooms, blissfully unaware of the danger that they're in? He gets his firearm in the safe in the attic and tells us that whatever we hear to not come downstairs, to stay hidden no matter what. Now I'm sobbing, begging my dad not to leave us, but he tells us that he has to go and get Ellie and Vince before something bad happens to them. Now, there's even more tears, as reality hits that there's 2 other people still in danger. Anne's understandably in hysterics because she's also fearing for her mom downstairs. My dad disappears and the air is thick with tension. We can still hear the dogs going crazy, indicating that those men were still on our property. My mom then calls another number, the armed security that drives around the area, and they say that they'll be over in about 10 minutes. They say to wait and stay hidden until they ring our bell at the gate. We all wait in silence, fearing that we'll hear a gunshot or anything indicating that these men are in our house. but there was just silence. The only sound was the dog's barks outside. After what seemed like hours, mostly likely a couple of minutes, we heard stomping coming up the stairs and my heart rate quickened. I remember shutting my eyes and praying that it was my dad with Ellie and Vince. Luckily it was. We all hid for a while and no one dared to speak. The dogs had seemed to calm down considerably, but they were still barking every now and then. The gate intercom rang and my dad told us to wait while he checked if it was the security company, and sure enough it was. He opened up and the nightmare was over. I remember standing up and my knees buckling from the adrenaline my body had endured. The armed security somehow notified the right police, and everyone investigated the garden. They found that there was actually 7 pairs of footprints, and that these guys bent these spikes on our wall and just climbed over. We got an electrical fence shortly after, so there must have been 2 other guys hiding in these shadows that my dad hadn't seen, which is actually creepy in its own right. South Africa's violent crime is quite bad, and it's too common for horrible things to happen during home invasions. I was obviously so young at the time that I didn't know the horrors of the world, and I was just scared of my family getting hurt. But now that I'm older, just the thought of 4 women being in the house and my mom being in nothing but a bath towel gives me chills to this day. The cops said the fact that there were so many guys instead of like 1 to 3 indicates that these guys possibly had sinister intentions. Thank goodness nothing happened to my family, and I'm forever thankful for my dad's quick thinking regarding the panic button. Also, I'm so glad my dad understands multiple languages and could manipulate the situation to benefit us. Lastly, my family will forever be in debt to our good boys and girls that warned us that night. A terrifying and life-changing outcome would have 100% happened that night, had it not been for our incredible dogs. From that day onwards, my dad always gave them leftover rice or meat with their dinner. R.I.P. Impy, Shudo, Dash, Fudge, Winkles, and Pikachu. I'm sure there is a special place in heaven reserved for you angels. Some backstory. My parents split when I was about 14. It wasn't a good breakup and my dad was an abusive drug addict. So when my mom left him, she was in a really bad place. Her and my older sister kept taking her to local bars since my mom was depressed. This led to my mom becoming an alcoholic since my sister was well on her way to becoming one too. During one of these nights, she met a guy. I didn't know much about him, just that they met him and his brother at a bar and now she was dating him. It went pretty fast and my sister would flirt with the brother to get free food and drinks from him. Around this time, I was about 15 and this dude just seemed off. He was probably early 40s or so and he was always going on my mom's dates with his brother. He just kind of hung around a lot. One day, my sister decided she wanted sushi and called the brother up to take us because she knew that he would pay. I didn't want to go, but we didn't have food in the house and I was hungry. We didn't have a sushi place in our town, so we had to drive to the city, which was about 30 minutes away. The entire ride, I just had this warning feeling in my stomach that kept telling me to get out of the car, that this was a bad idea. I was a giant ball of anxiety the whole 30 minutes. My sister sat in the front seat, completely oblivious to what was happening. Meanwhile, I kept catching him staring at me in the rearview mirror. Once we got to the restaurant, he sat himself directly across from me. He wanted to sit next to me, but I rushed to sit next to my sister instead. It was awkward, but my sister talked a lot, so I was kind of able to hide. Eventually, she got up to go to the bathroom, and then I was all alone with him. Almost immediately, he asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I said no. "That's good," he said. "You're too good for the high school boys. They're only after one thing." I just nodded, not knowing what to say. He then went on to ask if I liked Disneyland, and I said yes. He got excited and went on about how he would take me, but hotels were expensive, so we would probably have to share a room. It would just be us, so my mom and his brother could be alone. He said my sister couldn't come though because he couldn't afford to pay for us all to go. At this point, I was extremely uncomfortable, and I just wanted my sister to come back. She finally did, and he switched to just talking to her. She didn't notice anything was wrong or that he kept looking at me. Once we had finished, he took us home and invited himself in. I went to my room and I locked the door and hid. At one point, someone tried to open my door, but they stopped once they felt that it was locked. My mom and her boyfriend came home around then. I tried talking to my sister, but she brushed me off. They had invited us back to their house, and I wanted so badly to stay home, but they forced me to go too. Almost immediately, my mom and her boyfriend went to the room and left my sister and I with them. He got my sister drunk pretty fast and tried to get me to drink, but I kept refusing. It got to the point where my sister was almost blacked out drunk, and I was freaking out because once she passed out, it would just be us. I started texting my brothers hoping that one of them would be able to pick me up. Thank God my oldest brother responded. I told him what was happening and he came to get me. He showed up and told the guy that it was late and that I had school, so he was taking me home. He tried to protest, but my brother was very firm about it. He loaded my sister in the car, texted my mom that he was taking us home, and then we left. My brother didn't live with us since he was about 30 at the time and had his own family, so he didn't know what was going on. I told him the full story and he got really quiet, and then waited until my mom got home. He told her off, shamed her for putting me in that situation, and told her that if it continued, he would move me into his house. My mom broke down then and told him that she wanted to break up with her boyfriend because of his brother. I found out when I was older that he would sneak by the door to listen to them when they had sex. I think more happened, but my mom never talked about it more than that. She broke up with him, got a good job, and sobered up with the help of my brother. It took my sister a lot longer, but she eventually got her life back together. Okay, to preface this, here's a little backstory. At the time of this incident, I was 17 years old and a senior in high school. I rode the school bus sometimes when my friend didn't drive me home. This is what happened that day. I got off my school bus at my street, and the stop was at an intersection between my street and the highway. My street isn't a big street, it only has about 7 houses, and every person on my street is a business owner. I know all my neighbors. Well, I got off my bus, and while I'm walking towards my street, a white van pulls up and stops in front of the bus. The van had tinted windows and those sometimes illegal tints on the front window as well. Well, I walked onto my street and the bus drove away. And once the bus went away, the van turned onto my street. It drove slow and kept with me. I immediately was just like, oh, absolutely not. Because kidnapping is a big thing in my state. I saw the car stop right next to me, and that's when I ran. I ran across one of my neighbor's lawns as I heard the man in the van open his door. I went on the phone and turned on Moonlight, an app where if I let go of the button on the screen, it immediately sent police to my location. I ran as fast as I could and hid for 10 minutes, waiting for the van to drive away. Once the van left, I went to my house and told my parents, and we called the police. The police came, interviewed me, and told me that there had been sightings of that car all around town, and there were even a few disappearances linked to it. It's been about a year and nothing has happened, and I'm beyond happy about that fact.